Hi, if you are watching this video, then that means you have said yes to JoyKC and volunteering in some capacity, and we are so thankful for that. My name is Katie, and this is Meg, and at JoyKC, we are really passionate about creating an environment where individuals with disabilities feel seen and loved, and ultimately building relationships with them, but also helping lead them to Christ. We really want to make sure that they know that they are loved and fought for by Jesus. And in this video, we're going to be going over some different things. We're going to be going over some ministry safety, some guidelines, and some best practices. We also do have a computer in front of us, so if you see us looking down, we're going to be referencing some notes to make sure we don't miss anything.
Hey everyone, as Katie said, my name is Meg. Thank you so much for being here and for watching our video. At JoyKC, it's really our heart to create a space of dignity and meaningful relationship for men and women with disabilities. It's really interesting because people with disabilities actually represent the nation's largest minority group that anyone can join at any time. I think it's really interesting because people with disabilities, however, really represent a community that can so often be overlooked, mistreated, and misunderstood. I think society has a lot of negative and outdated views regarding disabilities, which really can create negative stereotypes, which then can create barriers for inclusion. I think some examples of negative stereotypes include individuals being presumed to be helpless, unable to make decisions for themselves. They may be denied job, housing, or other opportunities on the basis of disability. They may be thought that they're unable to take care of themselves, may be seen as vulnerable, and can often be targets of physical and sexual assault. At JoyKC, we really want to not only be an environment that helps to disassemble and rewrite those negative stereotypes, but also do that through relationship. And we really believe that that's possible through intentional friendship. And as a volunteer, you play a super, super important role in helping us be able to accomplish that.
So there's also a huge ripple effect when you say yes to JoyKC. We not only can serve more and more participants who come to our events, but we're also able to bless and serve more families and caregivers as we can give them a few hours off. But also there is an even larger ripple effect happening. One of those being that we are able to rewrite more and more stereotypes that can be negatively associated with this population, but we also can gain more social capital, leading to a higher quality of life for these individuals. But I think the biggest ripple effect is just the kingdom of God and being able to share Christ's love with this population as well. We do implement a buddy system. So what this looks like is, as a volunteer, you may be paired up one-on-one with a peer. And we do this to really emphasize and encourage that relationship building with one another. This isn't a model to babysit or have to look after someone, but really connect with them, get to know them. And your role as a volunteer also might look different. You might not be paired one-on-one in this event, one-on-one with a individual. Maybe you'll be helping lead an activity or a station. But we really believe in this model because we want to encourage and foster those relationships. When you do come to an event, you will get something called a yellow card. And if you are paired one-on-one with a participant, then that piece of information is going to give you some basic knowledge about your buddy. It might say their age. It might also say some helpful tips in how they communicate or how they might present some of their behaviors. We also just want to go over some volunteer requirements. As a volunteer, in order to be paired one-on-one as a buddy, we do require you to be 15 years or older. We also will be running a background check and be sending you a form that you have acknowledged that you've at least watched this training video. If you are a family with young children and you want to volunteer, we would still love to have you. What we might have you help with is help run an activity or a station, or maybe your family together can be paired one-on-one with a participant.
Yeah, and before we get further into just additional ministry guidelines and logistics, we just kind of want to pause and acknowledge that this might be really outside of your comfort zone. And we just want to acknowledge that you're really brave for saying yes. It's always awesome when we have volunteers come to JoyKC who have past experience serving and loving folks with disabilities, but that in no way is a requirement or a prerequisite. We really believe that a perfect volunteer is someone that has an open heart and is willing to show up. And so if you can do those things, then you're everything that we could want in a volunteer. JoyKC really hopes to offer a safe space for people to learn and to grow in confidence and to build relationships with the men and women that come to our programs. And just as another disclaimer, volunteers are never going to be put in situations where you're alone. That not only goes way against our own liability and coverage as a ministry, but also just goes against the mission of everything that we're trying to create at JoyKC.
And as Meg was saying, you are never going to be by yourself at these events. And if you are paired one-on-one with a participant, we really want to make sure we're serving not out of assumption. So those of you who have prior experience, that's awesome, working with maybe individuals with certain disabilities, but we never want to assume, oh, hey, I know so-and-so with this disability, this person that I'm working with must be exactly like this other person that I know. So we want to make sure that we're not serving out of assumption. Every disability, just like all of us, we are all individualized. Every one of us has different needs, and we want to make sure that we consider those and never do even tasks for an individual that maybe they already know how to do. And we'll get into that more later on, but the big point, the takeaway here is just to serve not out of making assumptions for that individual.
Yeah, Katie, I think that's so good. I think it is important to just remember that disability is so individualized. We really want to talk about what it looks like to serve in excellence, right? And there's so many different layers of what that could look like, but we're just going to break that down into 3 major areas. The first area being communication etiquette. There is a lot of verses in the Bible that talk about from the overflow of our heart, the mouth speaks. And whenever we're at a JoyKC event, when we're talking to someone with a disability or about someone with a disability, we really hope that the overflow of the heart and the verbal language associated declares nothing but honor and dignity and worth. So just a few examples of how we can practice effective communication etiquette include speaking directly to the person that you are serving, using age-appropriate voice, using age-appropriate conversation topics, and even if you know exactly what a person is trying to say, letting them finish their sentence because that's really dignifying to let someone finish their thought.
All right, so as Meg was talking about some communication etiquette, we also want to talk about something called people first language. People first language is where we are making sure that we're always putting the person before any label or diagnosis. So for example, when we are talking to someone or talking about someone, the best way to acknowledge someone is by their name. So we really want to make sure that we know our buddy's name, know the names of individuals in our group so that we can call people by their names. We also want to make sure that we are never referring to an individual just by their diagnosis. First of all, it sounds really weird and awkward. I would never say, oh, that autistic boy over there is da-da-da-da-da. Okay, that just doesn't sound natural. It's rude to point that out. So we want to make sure that we're using their name. If there ever is a scenario where you, in a conversation, need to bring up the person's diagnosis, instead of saying the autistic boy, we can say the boy with autism. We also want to make sure that we are using people first language, not just at JoyKC, but also in the community around us as it reflects best practice.
Another area that we want to talk about is self-determination. And by definition, that just means if somebody can do it, then they should do it. I think the reality is there might be times at a JoyKC event that you'll provide service or help somebody. But we, like Katie was saying, we don't want to make assumptions that people need our help. And so when we offer assistance, we want to make sure that we do that in a really dignified manner and that we ask if they need help before just doing it.
Yeah, and when you receive your buddy's yellow card, it will give just a very short synopsis of maybe some of the levels of support that they might need. But it's also important to remember that every individual goes at their own pace. And again, maybe some information on the yellow card is a little bit different than what you're seeing, and to just kind of keep an open mind about that. But as Meg was saying, a lot of these individuals have worked really hard to gain certain skills, and we don't want to take that away from them by just assuming that they can't do anything and we're just going to do everything for them. That's really not loving and serving them well. We want to encourage them to be as independent as possible while also, helping them when needed.
The final area that we want to talk about is safe and appropriate behavior. Like Katie was saying, we want to be an environment that prepares and empowers people and not an environment that creates a sense of dependency. At JoyKC, we really want to help empower our folks to step into the real world. And I don't know about you, but when I think about the real world, I think about maintaining a job. I think about living outside of mom and dad's house. I think about having reciprocal relationships. And at JoyKC, we really want to be a training ground that people are able to safely engage and practice those skills so that they can ultimately achieve their goals, right? Another point when we're talking about safe and appropriate behavior is we just really want to give our volunteers explicit permission that you have our blessing to help redirect our folks to engage in this kind of appropriate and safe behavior. Obviously, we want to redirect in a kind way, but ultimately it is so that they can step into open doors and to achieve their goals in the real world. All of these things not only apply to programs that we host and in-house, but also to programs that we host in the community.
Yeah, and I just also want to give maybe one example of maybe what this might look like at a JoyKC event. So maybe you're paired one-on-one with an individual and they love giving you hugs and they love holding your hand and they might just love physical touch. That is all great, and we don't want to say, no, you can't give hugs or you can't, touch your buddy. But we also, what Meg was saying is we want to think about, okay, what is socially acceptable behavior? So like, yes, let's give each other a hug, but then you have permission to be like, hey, we already did a hug. Let's try to join in this activity, rather than maybe giving 50 hugs throughout the whole night. That's just one example of that.
I think another example to piggyback off of that too is, man, if you don't know the person, right? If you're a new volunteer and you're walking into a new setting and somebody comes and gives you a random hug under the umbrella of a ministry, that might be normal, but in the real world, that's weird, right? And so we're preparing our people for the real world. And so we want to, again, make sure that everything that we're promoting translates into those real world settings.
Okay, so now we're gonna go over some ministry safety guidelines. Honestly, the biggest ministry safety rule that we have is the rule of 3. This is probably something you're already familiar with, especially if you serve in any other volunteer capacities. But you are never to be alone with a guest. Even if you are assigned a one-on-one buddy, you should never be by yourself with that individual. So let's say your buddy starts walking down a hall or going in a different room. It is your job to say, hey, I need a third, so that you are never one-on-one. If your buddy needs support in the restroom, you definitely need to get another volunteer and we can assist you there, but you should never be alone with a guest. And honestly, all of our events, whether they're in-house or in the community, we're all together. So that would honestly be very difficult to ever be put in a position where you are alone with a guest. So that is our biggest rule of thumb, is to always be in a group of 3.
Another area that we want to highlight is bathroom support. And Katie already mentioned this. Rule of 3 is the most important thing to keep in mind when we're talking about the bathroom. Just another side note here, you will have received a yellow card at the beginning of the night, and you will know probably before you even meet the person what their needs are, bathroom being one of them. If this is an area that makes you feel uncomfortable in any way, please make sure that you recruit another JoyKC volunteer or staff, and we would love to assist you in this way. Obviously, the bathroom can be kind of a sensitive situation, so make sure that we're really honoring in this way. We want to make sure that we are wiping front to back, even if it's just number 1. If the person that you're serving does not need assistance, please do not leave them unattended. The rule of 3 still applies here, so make sure you wait outside of the door or the bathroom stall until the person is finished, then go resume your activities.
Okay, another area of ministry safety that we want to go over is confidentiality. You've heard us mention the yellow card, and if you are paired up one-on-one with a participant, that will have some of their medical and personal information, and we want to make sure that we keep that private. There's no need for us to be talking about that with our friends or other people in terms of what their diagnosis is, maybe what food allergies they have. So we want to make sure that we're honoring that person and keeping that confidential just for us to know. And then also when you have that document, to make sure to give that back to Meg or myself, to not keep it in your pocket for the night, for safety purposes there. But honestly, a big point of this is to, no matter what diagnosis that your participant buddy may have, that we really emphasize the support that they need over their diagnosis. Because again, this is where we can go back into maybe we're making assumptions based off of this diagnosis that we have prior experience, but really just remembering that on that piece of paper, there is some needs that they might have and some areas of support, and that's how we can help them, and focus on that more than a diagnosis that they come in with.
Another area that we want to highlight is wheelchair etiquette. There are some men and women that participate in JoyKC that utilize wheelchairs. Just as a major note here, a wheelchair is an extension of somebody's body, and so whenever we're interacting with a wheelchair, we want to make sure that we do that in a super, super honoring way. Your yellow card, like anything else, is going to tell you the level of support that this individual may require. If you are paired with someone who utilizes a wheelchair, here are just 2 helpful tips. If you're going through a doorway or at an incline, please make sure to just go through backwards. This will prevent the individual from falling forward. Also make sure that a buckle is fastened before any transport takes place.
Yeah, so now we're going to talk about something that we call open arms. And what we mean by this is, let's say you are paired with someone, or there's someone in your group who starts going in a different direction that you don't want them to go in. So they're wanting to go into a different classroom when you guys are doing an activity in this classroom. Instead of putting your hands ever on another individual, we want to have an open hand policy. So we want to use our bodies and our hands and position ourselves to guide them in the direction that we want them to go. So please make sure that you never grab or pull, even if they are darting somewhere you don't want them to go. You know, again, there's going to be a lot of other volunteers and staff around. We will make sure that we get in front of them and use our bodies and our open hands to position them to help them go the direction that we want them to go. So this also leads us into the possibility of maybe seeing some behaviors arise at our events. This is really rare, but just some tips for you that if in the case of a problem behavior, so for example, maybe the individual is starting to display some aggression because they're getting frustrated. Maybe they're getting frustrated because they're trying to communicate something to you and you're not understanding what they're needing. Maybe they're starting to use inappropriate verbal behavior, or even some self-harm behavior. What we want to do is for you to either come get Meg, myself, or another JoyKC staff member, and we will ask everyone to kind of evacuate the area for a couple reasons. One, for your safety and everyone else's safety, but also just for some privacy for that individual. And we really want to emphasize that in no case should you ever be putting your hands on another person. But again, if it ever gets to that point, Meg or myself will be there, so it shouldn't be you in that position. Some other things that are not allowed at our events would be gum. And why we don't encourage gum is because we do have a lot of people who utilize wheelchairs, and we just want to prevent the scenario of gum ever getting on the floor, which would then maybe get on someone's wheelchair. So please don't come with gum. And then another one is cell phones. Obviously, you can have a cell phone on you. We do not collect cell phones, but at our events, we really need all eyes and hands on deck. So we really don't want anyone engaging on their cell phones at our events. This also includes taking pictures with your phone. We have a photo release for individuals who are okay with their photo and video being taken. So we ask that you please do not take photos and videos of individuals unless you have their or our permission to do so. All right, so now that you have watched this video, what are your next steps? We ask that you complete the form just by signing it and returning it back to us saying that you have watched this training video. And then your email will be added to a volunteer database where you will receive information about upcoming events that you are invited to volunteer and participate in. So those are your next steps. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook just to see more pictures, to get more information about when our next events are. If you have a family or friend who's also interested in volunteering, please be sure to send their information our way. We would love to have them. Thank you so much for your willingness to come and participate at JoyKC. We really couldn't do this ministry without you, so we are so grateful for you and for your yes.